My name is Tara Whitmore, I'm 28. On the night of my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner, I was standing in the parking lot of the Harrington Inn in a bridesmaid dress. I'd altered myself, locked out of the private dining room, because my stepfather said I'd embarrassed the family by asking why my name wasn't on the seating chart. Inside, 40 guests clinked glasses and laughed at whatever toast my stepfather was giving. The chandelier light spilled gold through the frosted glass doors. My mother sat at the head table in a blush blazer, not looking toward the exit. My stepsister, the bride, twirled the stem of her wine glass and didn't turn around. I thought that was the lowest I'd ever felt. I was wrong, because 10 minutes later, while my heels were sinking into wet November grass and my phone battery was at 4%, a silver car pulled into the lot, and the woman who stepped out of it was someone my stepfather had spent 9 years convincing me had written me off entirely. What he didn't know was that she'd been trying to reach me every single year, and she had paperwork to prove it. Before I take you back, if you've ever been made to feel invisible by the people who were supposed to protect you, hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Now let me start at the beginning. I'm 19 years old. My mother remarries on a Saturday in October. The ceremony is at a vineyard 40 minutes outside the city, and everything is the color of wine and late afternoon light. My mother looks beautiful. My new stepfather, whose name is Glenn, gives a speech at the reception about building a new chapter and chosen family and the future we'd all share together. People dab their eyes. I sit at table 9 with Glenn's college friends and their teenage kids, none of whom I've met before. My mother is at table 1. She waves at me from across the room once, early in the evening. After that, she doesn't look over again. Glenn has a daughter. Her name is Ainsley. She's 23 to my 19, and from the first weekend, she stayed with us. She made the rules clear without ever saying them out loud. She got the guest room with the ensuite bathroom. I moved my things to the small room off the garage. Ainsley told her father I'd offered. I hadn't. But I didn't say so. I was new to this arrangement, and I didn't yet know how much silence would cost me. The rules built on themselves, the way rules do when no one enforces the limits. I cooked dinner on nights my mother worked late. I drove Ainsley to appointments when Glenn needed the car. I planned my mother's birthday dinner, booked the restaurant, wrote the card from both of us. Ainsley picked the gift. When guests came, Ainsley sat in the living room. I refilled the water pitcher. When my mother's friends asked how I was doing, Glenn answered for me. She's great, she's so self-sufficient. She doesn't need much. He said it warmly, which was the worst part. He said it like a compliment. Like needing nothing was an achievement, instead of a condition he'd manufactured. I want to tell something I won't fully understand for years. My grandmother on my father's side, Nana Bet, what I called her, had been sending me birthday cards since I was 12 years old. Cards, and sometimes small gifts. A book I'd mentioned once wanting. A gift card to the art supply store I'd loved in middle school. My father died when I was 11. Nana Bet was his mother. After he passed, she was the thread that still connected me to the half of myself that Glenn and Ainsley had no claim over. I didn't know. Standing at that wedding reception at table 9, that every card she sent was being returned. I won't learn that until much later, but I'll get there. I'm 22. I come home for Thanksgiving break during my junior year of college. I've been living in the dorms on a partial scholarship, covering the gap with a campus job shelving books in the library. Glenn offered to help with tuition once, in passing, at dinner. When I said I'd appreciate that, he changed the subject. I stopped waiting. I learned to fill in the gaps myself, the way water finds a path through whatever's been sealed up. Ainsley is engaged by this Thanksgiving. His name is Foster, and he is exactly the kind of person you'd expect a man named Foster to be. Tan in November, a firm handshake, a habit of speaking slightly louder than necessary. Glenn loves him immediately. They stand in the kitchen talking about golf and property taxes while my mother sets the table and I make the pie from scratch because Ainsley mentioned once that she didn't like store-bought crust. After dinner, I'm doing dishes alone when my mother comes in. She picks up a dish towel and stands beside me, and for a moment it feels like it used to. Before Glenn, before Ainsley, before the guest room with the ensuite became Ainsley's and I started sleeping next to the garage. She says, Ainsley and Foster set a date. I say, that's wonderful. She says, June of next year. I wait. She says, I want you to be part of the wedding, Tara. Of course. I turn to look at her. She's drying a serving dish and not making eye contact. Glenn thinks it might be better if you're not in the bridal party. Just as a guest. He says it'll keep things simple. Ainsley has so many friends and the photos get complicated and I hand her the last dish. I say, okay, Mom. I go to my room. I sit on the edge of the bed in the small room off the garage and I stare at the water stain on the ceiling. It's shaped like a hand, fingers open. I've stared at it for 3 years, and I still can't decide if it looks like it's reaching out or waving goodbye. Here's what I don't say that night. I've been going to that school 50 miles away and coming home to this house and cooking and cleaning and driving and planning and staying quiet. And the one thing I wanted was to stand beside my sister, my stepsister, technically, but still, on her wedding day. Not because I love her, I don't. Not because we're close, we aren't. But because being asked would have meant something. And not being asked means something too. I don't say any of that. I say okay. I go to sleep, I wake up and I drive back to school. 10 months later, June arrives. I take 2 days off my library job and I spend money I don't have on a gift from the registry. A set of linen napkins Ainsley had favorited, $68. I buy a dress from a consignment shop. Dark navy, T-length, nothing that would photograph dramatically. I am good at not photographing dramatically. I've had years of practice. The wedding is at a venue outside the city. It's beautiful. Everything is white and ivory and pale gold. Ainsley looks stunning in a way that makes sense for her. She has always known how to occupy a room. Foster cries at the altar, which earns him points I didn't expect to give him. I sit in the 3rd row, which my mother later tells me Glenn arranged personally. Not the back. He wanted it clear I wasn't hidden, just not forward, just right of center. Present but not prominent. That's been my position in this family for 9 years, and I didn't realize, until I was sitting in row 3, that it had a name. The reception is at the Harrington Inn, a venue 20 minutes from the church. I arrive with the other guests. The private dining room is where dinner will be served, but first there's the cocktail hour in the main lobby. I stand near the window with a glass of something sparkling and talk to one of Glenn's cousins who asks me twice what I do and forgets both times. Then it's time for dinner. People file toward the dining room. I look for my name at the place card table near the entrance and it isn't there. I check twice. I go through every card. I go back to the beginning. My name is not there. I find my mother near the bar. I keep my voice low. Mom, there's no place card for me. She looks over her shoulder. There might have been a mix-up with the printer. I say, is there somewhere I'm supposed to sit? She looks over her shoulder again, toward Glenn, who is holding court near the fireplace with Foster's father. She says, let me find out. And she moves toward Glenn, and I watch her reach his elbow and say something, and watch him lean down to hear her, and then straighten and say something back. And she nods. And she walks back to me. She says Glenn thinks it was probably the printer. He says just find an open seat. I look at the dining room, at 40 people finding their names, and their chairs, and their tables, at Ainsley, laughing with her bridesmaids by the head table, at Foster's mother adjusting the centerpiece, at the empty spaces filling up one by one. There is no open seat that isn't someone's missing guest. I am not a missing guest. I was never a seated one. I say, okay, Mom. Let me just get some air. I walk out the side exit into the parking lot. November in the Pacific Northwest is not kind. The air is wet and close to 40 degrees, and the grass between the pavement squares is soft and dark. I'm wearing heels that are already unsteady, and a dress I bought secondhand, and I have 4% battery on my phone. I lean against the stone wall of the inn. And I look at the sky and I think, for the first time with full clarity, I have been pretending this is temporary for 9 years. The side door opens. A woman comes out. She's in her 60s, small, with silver-streaked hair, pulled back simply and reading glasses pushed up on her head. Her name is Maxine, and she's the florist who did the centerpieces. She did the wedding flowers too. I'd spoken to her briefly while she was setting up, and she'd asked if I was with the bride's side or the groom's. And I'd said both and neither, and she'd laughed and said she knew that feeling. Now she comes outside and sees me against the wall in the November dark, and her face changes. She says, "Honey, are you all right?" I say, "I'm fine. I just needed some air." She looks at my heels in the wet grass. She looks at the door I came out of. She says, "Did something happen in there?" I say, "There was no seat for me at dinner. It's fine. Mix up with the printer." Maxine is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "You're the daughter, aren't you? Not Ainsley, the other one." And something about the way she says it, not unkindly, just plainly, like she's naming something that exists whether or not anyone acknowledges it, makes my throat close. I say, "I'm Tara, I'm her stepsister." Maxine nods. She says, "I need to make a phone call. Stay here a minute?" She steps around the corner. I look at my phone, 3% now. I'm thinking about calling a rideshare when the screen lights up with a number I don't recognize. A 503 area code, Portland, maybe. I almost don't answer. But my battery is at 3%, and I'm standing in a parking lot in a dress I bought second-hand, and I have nowhere to be, so I pick up. A woman's voice. Measured and warm and with the faintest trace of the South that had never fully left. "Tara," she says. "My name is Bette Whitmore. I'm your father's mother. I don't know if you remember me." I sit down on the curb. I don't care about the dress. I remember her. Not well. I was 11 when my father died, and she lived far away. And Glenn didn't encourage contact, and I'd been told, gently, and then less gently, that she'd moved on with her life, that she didn't reach out, that it was better not to hold on to things that weren't reaching back. I believed it. I was 12, and then 13, and then I was 19 marrying into Glenn's careful arrangement, and I stopped thinking about it. I say, "I remember you. You used to call me Little Bird." A pause. Then, "Yes, I did. She says she's been trying to find me. She says she wrote letters. She says she sent birthday cards. She says she called the house number twice and Glenn told her I wasn't interested in contact. She says she hired someone to locate my address when I went to college and mailed a letter there and it came back unopened. She says she never stopped trying. I say I never got any of it." "I know," she says. "I know that now." She asks where I am. I tell her. She says, "Stay there." She says, "I'm not far." I need to stop here for a second, because what happened next I still think about every time I'm in a parking lot at night. Before I tell you, if you've ever been told that someone who loved you had given up on you, and later found out that was a lie, type "still" here in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. The November wet keeps coming. I wrap my arms around myself and think about my father, not in any coherent way, just his hands. He had a way of resting his hand on my shoulder when we walked somewhere, not holding on, just present. A weight that meant "I'm here, I see you, you don't have to do this alone." I'd forgotten that until right now, sitting on this curb. The side door opens. Maxine comes back around the corner. She sees me on the curb and doesn't ask questions. She just goes inside and comes back with a folded table linen, white cotton, still warm from wherever the inn stored them. She drapes it over my shoulders and sits on the step near me. She says, "Someone's coming." I say, "You called her." She says, "I've known Bette Whitmore for 11 years. She reached out to me when she was trying to find you. She knew I did weddings in this area, and she hoped someday I might see your name on a client list." She nods toward the door. "Your stepsister's engagement photos. The florist she hired. That's how Bette found out the wedding date." I say she's been looking for me this whole time. Maxine doesn't answer. She doesn't have to. The door behind us opens. Glenn is standing in the frame, a glass of scotch in one hand, his expression doing the thing it does when he's deciding which version of himself to use. He sees Maxine. He sees the linen around my shoulders. He sees me on the curb. He says, "Tara, what are you doing out here?" People are asking. I look at him. No one is asking. He says, "Come inside. We can sort out the seating." Maxine stands up. She's 5'2" and 60 years old, and she squares her shoulders in a way that takes up more space than her height should allow. She says there was no seat for her, Glenn. He says, there was a printer error. She says, I printed the place cards. A pause, long enough to be significant. Glenn looks at me. He switches registers. I know this shift so well I can feel it coming before it lands. His voice goes soft, the concerned stepfather voice. Tara, sweetheart. I know tonight has been hard. You've always struggled with these big family events. We've tried so hard to include you. I look at him. I look at the door. I look at the parking lot where a set of headlights is just now turning from the street. I say, you told Nana Bet I didn't want contact. His expression doesn't move. That's the tell. When Glenn is caught, he goes very still, the way a card player goes still when the hand has turned. He says, that woman left when your father was alive. She was never a stabilizing presence. I say, you told me she'd moved on. You told me she wasn't interested. He says, I was protecting you. Maxine turns away from him very deliberately. The way you turn away from something you've decided isn't worth your attention. She faces the parking lot. The headlights are closer now. Glenn tries one more time. He steps forward, reaches out, and puts his hand on my shoulder. The same spot where my father used to rest his. He says, your mother needs you inside. It's your sister's night. I look at his hand on my shoulder. I look at the door. I look at the parking lot. I say, she's my stepsister. He removes his hand. I don't go inside. Across the lot, a silver sedan pulls to the curb and stops. The engine idles. A woman gets out of the passenger side. Not young, not frail, somewhere in her mid-70s and moving with the deliberate pace of someone who is in no hurry because she has already made all the decisions she needs to make. White hair, a dark coat, a canvas bag over one shoulder that looks like it came from a library sale. She sees me. She stops walking. I'm sitting on a curb in a second-hand navy dress with a table linen over my shoulders, and my heels are ruined and I have 2% battery. I probably look exactly like someone who's been waiting on the outside of things for 9 years. Because that is exactly what I am. She crosses the lot in a straight line. She doesn't look at Glenn. She crouches down in front of me, which must be hard on her knees, and she cups my face in her hands. Her palms are dry and warm and smell faintly of lavender. She says, little bird, and I recognize her, not from clear memory. I was 11 and my father was gone and the years got complicated. But from a photograph I'd found once in a box of my father's things that Glenn hadn't gotten to yet. A photo of a birthday party, a woman with the same white hair and a younger version of a face I'm looking at right now, laughing with her arm around my father's shoulder. I'd kept that photo in my jewelry box for 7 years. I say, I still have your picture. Her eyes close. When they open, they're bright and fierce. She says, I have yours. Every school photo your father ever sent me. She squeezes my hands. I kept all of them. She pulls me into her arms. I'm cold and wrinkled, and I smell like parking lot and November rain. She holds on anyway. Then she stands. She looks at the Harrington Inn. She looks at the golden light through the dining room windows. She looks at Glenn, who is still standing in the doorway, and she reaches into her canvas bag and pulls out a folder. Glenn. Her voice is the kind of quiet that makes you stop moving. He steps forward. His expression rearranges itself into something genial and confused. Bet. I didn't realize you'd be. This is a private event, she says. I know it is. She opens the folder. She pulls out a document. She says, I have here 9 years of returned mail, birthday cards, letters. 2 certified letters, both signed for, both sent back unopened. She holds it where the parking lot light catches it. Everyone addressed to Tara Whitmore. Glenn's jaw shifts. That's not a second document. Phone records. 2 calls to your home number, she says. 1 in 2016, 1 in 2018, and your response to me, in writing, stating that Tara was not interested in contact. He says she was a minor. I was making decisions in her best interest. Nana Bet looks at him. She does not raise her voice. She says, she was a minor who had just lost her father. And you told his mother she didn't want to know her. Glenn reaches for the genial version of himself one more time. He looks at me. Tara, you know I've always considered you. I say, you didn't put my name on the seating chart. He says, that was a printing. I say, Maxine printed the cards. He stops. The dining room door opens from inside. My mother steps out. She's holding her clutch in both hands, looking between me and Glenn and the woman she hasn't seen in 9 years. Her face does something complicated. She says, Glenn, what's? He says this isn't the time, but it is the time. That's the thing about these moments, they are always exactly the time, no matter how inconvenient. My mother looks at me. I look at her. I think about the dish towel in the kitchen at Thanksgiving, the wave across the wedding reception when I was 19. The way she'd move toward Glenn's elbow when I needed her to move toward me. I say, Mom, did you know she'd been writing to me? She doesn't answer right away. That's its own answer. She says, Glenn thought it was better too. I say, did you know? A long moment. 40 guests inside, dinner getting cold. The bride probably wondering where her mother is. She says, I thought you'd settled in. I thought it was better not to open old. I say, okay, Mom, not angry. Not even sad exactly, just clear, the way water is clear when the sediment finally settles. Nana Bet opens her canvas bag again. One more document, she says, I'd also like you to know, Glenn, that I have retained an attorney. I am Tara's only surviving paternal grandparent, and there are financial matters pertaining to her father's estate that were never resolved. A college account, established in her name before he died, that you were named temporary administrator of. She looks at him steadily. My attorney has questions. Glenn's face does the thing it did in the kitchen when I mentioned the place cards. Very still. Card player still. Maxine is leaning against the wall with her arms folded, watching with the expression of a woman who has waited a long time to see exactly this. My mother says, Glenn, what college account? He says, that's not, it was a very small. She says, what college account? And then, Ainsley is there in her wedding dress, which is a thing that happens in parking lots on the night of your wedding rehearsal, when your family has enough unresolved matters to fill a canvas bag. She looks at the folder in Nana Bette's hands. She looks at Foster, who's followed her out and is reading the room with the quiet attention of a man who has just realized the property he's marrying into is more complicated than advertised. Ainsley says, Dad, what's happening? Glenn says nothing. This woman showed up uninvited. This is a private event. Ainsley says, is that Tara's grandmother? He says she's. Ainsley says, Dad, is that her grandmother? He stops. And Ainsley looks at me, really looks at me. Maybe for the first time since that first weekend, she stayed over and claimed the en-suite bathroom without asking. And whatever she sees, it shifts something's behind her eyes. She says, Glenn, did you leave her out of the seating chart on purpose? He says, Ainsley, tonight is your night, she says. I asked him to add her at a table with the cousins. She looks at me. I told him to add you. I thought he had. And here is the thing about the truth. You think you know where it lives, you think the lines are drawn and fixed and you've memorized the map. And then someone says something that restructures the whole geography. I look at Ainsley. I look at the 9 years of Thanksgivings and dish duty, and third rows and second-hand dresses, and a table linen from a coat closet, because there was no chair for me inside. And I understand that some of it wasn't her, not all of it, but some. I don't say this out loud. It's not the moment. But I tuck it somewhere. Nana Bet touches my elbow. She says, would you like to come with me tonight? She says it quietly, like a question that's also an answer. There's a hotel 20 minutes from here. She says, we can go over the documents in the morning. But tonight I'd just like to sit somewhere warm with you. I look at the dining room, at the chandelier light through the glass, at 40 people inside who watched me put out a seating chart all month. I'd offered to help. I always offered to help. And not one of whom came outside to check on me. I look at my mother. She's watching my face with an expression I recognize from the kitchen at Thanksgiving, like she's looking for something she put down years ago and can't quite locate. I say, tell Ainsley congratulations. Tell her I mean it. I take Nana Betta's arm. Maxine opens the canvas bag and hands her back the folder. I walk across the parking lot in my ruined heels, and Nana Bete shortens her stride to match mine, the way you do when you're walking beside someone you don't want to leave behind. I don't look back. The car is warm. Not venue warm, not chandelier warm, not the manufactured warmth of a private dining room that didn't have a chair for me. The kind of warm that your body stops bracing against. Nana Bet sits beside me. The driver pulls out of the lot. She reaches over and takes both my hands between hers. She doesn't rub them. She just holds them, steady, the way my father used us to rest his hand on my shoulder. She says, "I have something for you." She reaches into the canvas bag. She pulls out a small paper bag, folded at the top. She sets it on my lap. I open it. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, is a birthday card. The envelope is unsealed. On the front, in handwriting I don't know yet but will come to love, for Tara. Her 17th birthday, she says, "I have one for every year, not all here, but I kept them. I kept everyone." I open the card. It says, "Little bird, I don't know where you are tonight, but I baked a small cake, and I put your name on it." And I sat at my kitchen table, and I said happy birthday out loud, because I thought maybe, if I said it with enough conviction, the sound would find you somehow. I love you more than I can put in a card, but I'll keep trying. Love, Nana Bet. I hold the card in both hands. I don't cry the way. I cried in the small room off the garage, quiet and swallowed. I cry the way you cry when a window opens in a place you'd forgotten had windows. She doesn't shush me. She doesn't pat my back and tell me it's fine. She just holds on. When I finally settle, I look out the rear window. The Harrington Inn gets smaller. The parking lot lights blink out behind us as we turn the corner. Inside that building, Glenn is standing in a dining room where everyone now knows about a college account that isn't where it should be. My mother is holding her clutch in both hands and asking a question she should have asked 9 years ago. And Ainsley is in her wedding dress in November, realizing that the person she told her father to seat at the cousin's table was never seated at all. I press my forehead to the cold glass. I whisper, "Hi, Dad." She found me. The car turns onto the highway, the inn disappears, and for the first time in 9 years I feel the exact size of myself. Not smaller, not beside the point, just me. The fallout takes weeks to fully land, which is how these things work. Not a single moment of reckoning, but a slow shift, like weight, redistributing after a foundation settles. The financial matter Nana Betta's attorney raised turned out to be significant. My father had opened a college savings account when I was a 6. Glenn, as temporary administrator of the estate, had moved the funds, not spent them, moved them, into a joint account he controlled. The attorney described it, when I finally sat across a conference table and heard the summary, as creative management of an asset. The judge, several months later, described it as something else entirely. I never learned exactly how my mother felt about that. We spoke once, briefly, in January. She said she hadn't known about the account. She might have meant the college fund specifically. She might have meant all of it. I think she meant some version of the truth that she'd been living beside for 9 years without fully looking at. I didn't push. I'd done enough pushing to know when a wall is structural. She texted me on my birthday in March. A simple happy birthday. I replied, "Thank you. We are figuring out what we are now, slowly and without much language for it. Some things take longer to name than to feel." Ainsley called me in February. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 2 minutes long and mostly silence between sentences. She said, "I know I'm not who you'd call. I know we weren't close." She said, "I want you to know I didn't know about the letters." And then quieter, she said, "I asked him to add you to the seating chart. I thought he did. I'm sorry he didn't, that's all." She hung up. I listened to it 3 times. The third time I noticed, she said, "I'm sorry. Not it's complicated, or he meant well." I kept the voicemail. I haven't called back yet, but I might. Glenn's situation wound through legal channels in the way these things do. Slowly, paperwork first, undramatic in process and significant in outcome. I will not say more than that. He knows what he did. His attorney knows. My father's money found its way back to where it was supposed to go, and I used part of it to finish the last semester of a graduate program I'd deferred twice for money reasons. That felt right. like the right ending for a thing that had been going the wrong direction for too long. Nana Bettis' house is 3 hours away, outside a small town called Hadley, up in the hills where the cell service is inconsistent, and the mornings smell like pine and wet soil. The house is a farmhouse, not large. It has a wraparound porch that lists slightly on the east side, a garden she tends with clear opinions and specific tools, and a kitchen table where we have sat for entire afternoons without running out of things to say. She gave me a drawer in the guest room, then a shelf. Then she said, "The closet's just holding coats anyway," and cleared it out. I go there most weekends, sometimes longer. On the first morning I stayed, she put a box on the table, large, reinforced at the corners, the kind you get from a shipping store. She slid it toward me and said, "These are yours." Inside, 17 birthday cards, 12 Christmas cards, 4 letters, longer, written on hotel stationery and notepad paper, and the back of a grocery list once, which made me laugh through my nose. A photograph of my father at around my age, standing in front of a car he was clearly very proud of, a drawing she'd made on a paper bag, a small bird with detailed wings, labeled Little Bird, age 7, like a naturalist's field note. And at the very bottom, a document I didn't understand until I read it twice. A letter from a financial advisor, dated 8 years ago, confirming a trust established in my name, funded, untouched, waiting. She sat across from me the whole time I read. She didn't say anything. She brought tea at some point. She just stayed. I read everything. It took the rest of the morning. On the drive back to the city that Sunday, I asked her what she thought I should do about Glenn, about whether forgiveness was something I owed him or not. She drove for a while without answering. We passed through a stretch of highway where the trees came close on both sides and the light went amber and dappled. She said, "You don't owe anyone your forgiveness. That's a lie people tell to make the person who was wronged do the emotional labor." She paused, "But holding on to it costs you something." She looked at me briefly. "You get to decide what that trade is worth." I thought about it for the rest of the drive. I thought about the water stain shaped like a hand. I thought about the third row. I thought about the 14th birthday she baked a cake for, alone, and said my name out loud to an empty room because she thought maybe the sound would find me. I don't hate him. That surprised me. When I fussily checked. I thought I would, but what's there is something quieter. A distance that isn't angry. A boundary that doesn't need defending because I've simply stopped standing close enough to need one. I sent a letter through the attorney. 4 sentences. It said, "I received the returned funds. Please do not contact me outside of formal legal channels. I hold no hatred toward you. I hold nothing toward you," which is its own kind of answer. Some doors close softly. That doesn't mean they're open. I want to talk to you directly for a moment, not as a character, as the person who actually lived this. I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm not telling it so you'll hate Glenn, though I understand if you do. I'm telling it because for 9 years I thought the quiet I kept was peace. I thought if I cooked enough dinners and made myself convenient enough and took up just the right amount of space, not too much, not enough to threaten, someone would eventually see me. Open the door, pull up a chair. They didn't. And here's what I've learned since. The door was never locked. I just kept waiting for someone else to open it. My grandmother knocked for 9 years from the other side. That's not something I take lightly. That's not something I'll forget. She says, "You were never lost. You just couldn't hear me yet." I believe her. Today I work in a hospital. I finished that graduate degree, the one I deferred twice, and I now do patient advocacy work, which is mostly about making sure people in overwhelming situations have someone who knows the system and is on their side. I'm good at it. I think about why sometimes. I think it's because I know what it feels like when the room is full and you're still outside it. I know what it costs to have no one come check. I have an apartment now, 2 bus stops from the hospital. I have a small balcony with a pot of rosemary that has no business surviving this climate but persists anyway, which I respect. I have a tabby cat named Fielding who has strong opinions about bedtimes and no interest in my schedule. I go to Hadley most weekends. And on the ones I don't, Nana Bet calls on Sunday mornings, and we talk for an hour about whatever we want, which is everything, which is the whole point. Last November, exactly 1 year after the parking lot, she drove down and we went out to dinner at a place that had candles on the table and took reservations and required absolutely nothing of me. We sat across from each other with glasses of wine and no agenda, and I thought about the table linen she'd draped over my shoulders and the card she'd written. When I was 17 and the word little bird in a handwriting that knew me before I knew myself. I said, I have a question. She said, ask it. I said, how did you know? How did you keep trying for 9 years without any sign it was working? She looked at the candle for a moment. She said, I didn't know. She looked up. But your father loved you. That was enough to know. The rest I had to trust. I reached across the table and held her hand. Her rings were warm from the room. She said, Merry Christmas, little bird. I said, It's November, Nana Bet. She said, I know. I'm practicing. I laughed loudly in a restaurant and didn't apologize for it. That's what it feels like. Not a dramatic moment. Not a curtain coming down. Just a laugh in a warm room, her hand in mine. My name said by someone who never stopped knowing it. I'm inside now. I have been for a year, and that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Now I want to hear from you. If you've ever had someone fight to find you when you didn't know they were looking, type still here in the comments. If you're still waiting for your parking lot moment, type I'm waiting. Both are real. Both are brave. And if this story found you today, share it with someone who needs to know that not every door that's closed was locked from the outside. Sometimes someone's been knocking for years. Sometimes you just have to get quiet enough to hear it. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.